Okay, everybody, welcome. This is staff meeting Tuesday, August the 19th. Cruising through this month, and we're adopting a budget tomorrow. So, yep, let's get to work, Tom.
All right, good morning, Chairman, Commission. Three items for this staff workshop today. Scott is here from the Planning Department. He has several items to talk through. He'll go first. Then Tanya and Andrew and team will talk about admin building and give you some report out on due diligence concerning the Envision building. And then we're going to talk about tomorrow, the process, and Tom Henry and Lindsay will kind of walk us through the process tomorrow and what's going to be available for commission during the budget discussion tomorrow. So Scott, start us up and we'll keep moving.
Scott, thanks for coming over. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks so much for having me. Let's see. Is there a good way to advance the slides? I guess I just announce it. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep this to 30 minutes. So I just set a timer just so you know. Let's start with short-term rentals if we can. There are four separate planning items. One is short-term rentals. Another one is event centers in the county. One is letter notices. And then the fourth one is airport hazard zoning. Each one of these topics could take well over an hour. So yes, but the purpose today is really just to check in with you all. Number one, make sure if we're barking up the right tree, is this still are these community priorities? And if so, then are we headed in the right direction? Do these solutions look like something that's going to work for the needs of the community? So with that, the first one then is short-term rentals in the county. So again, as always, we're here to provide information, answer any questions, ask them at any time, and then we're here to receive feedback. So in terms of the overview, here's what we've got that we can go through today. So the first note is on process. So you'll notice where we are in this one is that the MAPC has actually made a recommendation to you all. So this is coming to you after the MAPC has made their recommendation. We have one of the planning commissioners here in the audience. So glad you're here. And so what you're going to go through today is what that recommendation consists of. So again, what is the issue? Why are we talking about short-term rentals? Well, because per the zoning code, they're not allowed to operate in the unincorporated Sedgwick County at this time. And we've talked about this before. I believe that we've deferred enforcement at this time because it's our standard practice when we're working on changing regulation that we do that. So there are a number of them that are operating right now. It's not a large number, but it's a rather small number of them, but they are operating. So in terms of context, and you've seen this before nationally, globally, all communities are kind of working on this. City of Wichita adopted theirs in 2023, and this one is largely modeled after that. So in terms of background, we've got a number of dates on here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but I just want you to know there's been a lot of dialogue about this, a lot of discussion at the advanced plans, and I really appreciate the effort that they've put into it because they really sink their teeth into issues, and we go through a lot of questions with them. So if you ever want to learn more about our process and more about the ins and outs of these things, I would recommend check out one of the advanced plans videos. I myself find it to be very helpful to go through those. So short-term rental in the city, that's currently the definition. It's in the zoning code. They're just what you would expect, Airbnbs, VRBOs. And, you know, this is what they might look like. I don't believe that any of these are in Sedgwick County, but these look very nice. Great place to stay. So just so everyone, so we've talked about the history, the process. We've talked about what a short-term rental is. Now we're going to go into what the recommendations are. So it would be, we would add a new definition, and the text is actually included as part of your packet. So I'm just providing the highlights on this one. Short-term rental in the county, it would require an administrative permit or a conditional use. So it's not, so they've got that process. They don't have to go through a full zone change for their property. And this is unique to the county in that it would only last for 5 years. The city of Wichita has a licensing and a zoning component. In order to keep it relatively straightforward for the county, we've only done the zoning, but we've made it so it has to be renewed every 5 years in case there's an issue or anything comes up or things change in the area. Would not allow an RV and may be permitted as either a primary or an accessory use. So you can just use the entire property for this, or you can have it as something that you operate on the back of your 40 acres or whatever it may be. Let's see, they've got to have an owner or operator designated for it, and they've got to be within 30 miles. So, and all of this information is really just to make sure that we can reach the owner if there's an issue, right? So we know who it is, someone can respond if there's something going on. Gatherings, you may have seen this in some other communities about gatherings and large parties taking place. So this has the requirement that there are no more than 20 adults. An adult in this case is defined as a person over 12 years of age. And that they can apply for a conditional use if they want to go above 20 adults. Because we know not all properties are the same. Sometimes there's really large houses that can accommodate more. So we want to provide that opportunity. Okay. And then, of course, they've got to be in compliance with all the applicable codes. There's a limitation on what short, that's really small text. Sorry, we're testing your vision right now. So it's a limitation that it's got to be typical things that you would associate with a short-term rental. They got to have trash service and got to be in compliance with codes. So here's an overview of the process. It's just know that it's streamlined compared to a regular full-on zoning, rezoning. This is the example from the city. So in terms of notification that goes out for these, the only notification would be a mailing that would go to the adjacent and adjoining properties. So you take out the streets and you imagine all those properties are touching, they're either touching it or they would be touching it if the streets and roads didn't exist. Here's how that plays out in the county. And here's another example of how that might play out. So you get the idea of just those properties that are right around it. So the mailing would go out. Oh, here's another one. Just make sure we're being very thorough. And then, so when it comes to a protest, it'd be similar in the way that a zoning protest works in that both owners, if there's two owners to a property, they would both have to sign the protest. So it's all the owners have to do that. And then what's unique about it is that little note at the bottom that protests are calculated based on the percentage of property owners. So a husband and wife who own a property would count as one owner together. So if the percentage of property owners overall that protest is over 50%, then that would cause, instead of an administrative permit, the streamlined process, then they would have to go for a conditional use. They would have that option. So what it does, this process is intended that you can do the streamlined version first. And then if it becomes controversial, then it becomes a conditional use, which has a public hearing, goes to the planning commission and all of that. A couple other things is that in the city of Wichita, we use a monitoring service to identify where short-term rentals are. That was a question. We talked about that as staff. We believe that the number of these operating in the county are fairly small right now. And so we really don't think that a monitoring service is warranted. So at this point, we're not recommending one, but I do want to make you aware that we had that discussion and talked about it. Also, enforcement would be complaint-based. And again, the 5-year cycle for applications. So with that, we'll skip on to feedback real quick. And I do want to acknowledge that we had a prior staff meeting. We talked about supply and demand. There were questions about taxation and fairness. We have Ronald from the appraiser's office who's here. So I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. And then there were also questions about business regulation, which registration, which is a little bit outside of the planning, but do want to acknowledge that those questions came up. So with that, that's what I've got to share on short-term rentals. And I'm just, any questions or feedback?
Okay, commissioners, any questions?
So I know they're not supposed to be operating any in the county, but are we getting any complaints or issues if anyone is operating any right now? Or what are you guys hearing?
Sure. When we had this discussion a while ago, there had been some complaints, but I don't know about any official enforcement at this time. I think with the suspension of the enforcement activities, I think that's kind of done away with some of the challenges because I think some of the complaints were just that they were operating. But I don't know about noise or light. I would defer to others if they've heard.
I recall whenever I was on the city council and we made the transition, whenever, we had some violent activity with some of the parties and that kind of centered it. And we went back and forth, I think we went way too far and then, we kind of had to meet in the middle on it. So just curious as to the differences, we're really not looking at parties that have been happening out in the county. We're really not looking at any violent activities or anything like that. So just trying to searching for more feedback. I've heard nothing about short-term. Nobody's reached out to me about short-term rentals in the county.
Yeah, I think on background, I think this one's actually not driven by complaints about short-term rentals, but rather about the fact that you can't legally operate one per the zoning code right now. So how do we allow them to do that?
A little context as to what I heard in my district were mostly events centers, wedding venues that had short-term rentals on the property and they weren't prohibited. So a bride and groom short-term rental of some sort. That's where this originated in my district with a few of my constituents. But how many short-term rentals are operating in the city of Wichita now? Do we have any idea?
Oh, gosh, I'll look to JR, but I think it's somewhere around 400. So
About 400. We don't envision anything like that's going to take place in unincorporated Sedgwick County to where this is going to be a significant,
I don't think so. Just based on the numbers that we're seeing right now. I would suspect it's probably less than 20 that are
Okay.
operating in the
the
unincorporated.
problems they're having in Wichita, if there are complaints about short-term rentals and those that do protest, what are those complaints and how do we mitigate the best we can anything in unincorporated part if we were to move forward with a short-term policy?
Probably one of the first complaints that we heard about were kind of large parties, I would say. You can see some of the regulations here have been crafted with a limitation on the number of people to help address that. Those really are not a substantial factor in the complaints I believe that we're hearing nowadays in the city of Wichita. Nowadays, what we're seeing is with the proliferation of them, it's more that residents don't want to have a short-term rental next to them. And the inability to have a long-term relationship with a neighbor in a residential setting and that kind of friction that generates is what we're seeing.
My last question was some of the taxation fairness discussions were around the impact that it was having to hotels. And hotels that are at 25% commercial property assessed value rate, and you have these hotel-like organizations and businesses that are operating under residential purview, that it was a competitive advantage that was unfair and inequitable. What was the conversation around that?
Additionally, for the record, Ronald Tidwell, Chief Deputy Appraiser. Short-term rentals with 5 bedrooms or less are classified as residential properties per direction from PVD.
Okay.
6 bedrooms or more falls under the 25% assessment rate for commercial.
Okay.
Talking with JR, he thought there might be 2 in the city of Wichita that actually turned out to qualify as 5 under the definition of what we're allowed to call a bedroom versus what Airbnb will allow you to call a bedroom. So.
Okay, right. That's helpful. Commissioner Lula.
Thank you, Chairman. My one last question, Scott. What's the background on the RV comments? I assume something. No RV. I mean, I assume there's some history or something there for you to bring it up.
Yeah, the history is really goes back to our zoning code, and I believe that prohibition's in there because it reflects the zoning code that you can't use an RV as a long-term dwelling unit in the county or in the city, because at some time I imagine there were people who were trying to live out of RVs on a permanent basis.
So are we saying that we would not open up the conversation? What if somebody did have an Airbnb out in the country and had an RV hookup? I guess that's because I have seen that in other states, and I was just curious if that's
We are always open to making sure, we want to make sure that we meet the needs of the community. At this time, it just is written this way because it reflects what our long-term policy has been on that. If we need to revisit that, we're more than happy to do that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I haven't heard a request on that. I figured there was some background on it for you to bring it up.
Yeah.
Commissioner Howe.
Thank you, Chairman. I know you did a good job explaining this, and I think it's my fault for not understanding, but the little happy faces there on page 13, slide 26, I guess it is. Did you say that husband and wife is one owner? And
Yes,
that's what
sir.
you said?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So each property has one owner.
Essentially, yes, sir. That's
One
correct.
vote. Okay.
Yep.
And does the petition percentage trigger any particular?
What happens, and I'm sorry, I went rather quickly, so I didn't maybe detail this as much, but the way this is set up is that you've got a couple of options to try and get if you want to open an Airbnb on your property or short-term rental, you can do an administrative permit, which is quite quick. All it requires is a notification of the adjoining properties. So you bring in your list of from a title company, their addresses and who it is, and then they mail out the notices, and essentially that can be approved in, I think, as little as 2 to 3 weeks. because we approve it administratively. And then only if the protest of the owners is above 50% of the owners that surround it, then we deny it. And if it gets denied, then they have the option of applying for a conditional use, which takes it through the regular process of the MAPC, all the public notice, and then potentially it could come to you if it's controversial.
And the notification is only by mail, you said. So there's no
It-
signage out there required.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
If someone's renting nearby, they would not necessarily know this is happening.
That's right. That is correct. Yeah.
So you said up to 20 adults is by right.
Yes, yes, sir.
Does it matter how big the facility is? Are you going to allow a short-term rental for up to 20 people? Only have 2 bedrooms or tiny little lagoon? There's no thought to.
No, there's no difference on that for the size of the property. Although if they did want to have more than that, they could apply for a conditional use to allow that would allow for more. And again, that's for gatherings. That's not necessarily all of the people who would be staying there. So I think when we start talking about occupancy, I'm going to defer to MABCD and JR, but that's going to depend on number of bedrooms as well. So their size will matter for people who are spending the night, but gatherings is limited to 20.
Okay, so but people staying there, you don't know the number off the top of your head?
No, sir, I don't. We didn't write anything specific into the code about that. It was just about gatherings.
Well, I know we have an existing county law code that says no more than 5 unrelated people can stay in the same house. So I don't know if that would apply here or not.
I believe that would. So
And then I guess my other question is, if there's conflict that arises because of bad behavior, is there a way for us to deny this based on, go back and, if you will, revisit this and change our mind if there's been a history of having to say,
yes.
So
we put in with every conditional use, there's a stipulation that if you are found to be in violation, that the conditional use can be null and void. So we would have that opportunity.
That administrative, or is that by vote of the commission, or how does that work?
I believe that would take staff to pursue it through an enforcement, and then ultimately I think it would go to the courts, maybe for a final determination, but I'll defer to others.
Chairman, I think on that, if it was to come up, it may be something where we would advise there to be some sort of a hearing for due process purposes, but I'd probably go to the planning commission more likely than not if that was to be the case. But we haven't actually had one of those play out at this point.
And then finally, I guess my last question is just clarify, what is a monitoring service?
Monitoring service. So what's come about with short-term rentals and what we use at the city of Wichita is we contract with a vendor who uses artificial intelligence to scrape off the data from Airbnb, VRBO, and all these websites. And then it looks at other data, maybe, I don't know what other, maybe Google Street View or something, and it matches up the properties that are advertised with physical locations, because on Airbnb's site, they're not going to give you the address until you book. So that's how we're able to determine where these things are located and whether or not they're in compliance.
I guess that brings up a good question. If someone's doing this activity, but they don't, I guess, comply with the regulation, then what's our remedy to that?
At this point, it would be complaint driven. And if they are doing this without having the proper zoning, then there would be zoning enforcement actions.
Thank you.
Okay, Scott, I see in February, the planning commission voted 12-0 to recommend adoption.
Yes, sir.
What's the next steps here?
It's coming to you all. So,
Okay.
Yep, that'll be the next one. So this is kind of a preview of what you'll see.
Okay, when are you thinking?
I don't know. It's just going to depend on schedules and getting the paperwork put together. We wanted to make sure we touch base with you first. So now that we've done that, we'll work on getting the schedule put together.
Any day but August 20th. Okay, thanks, Scott.
You bet. Thank you. Is everyone ready for the next one? We
Yes.
can hold off.
No, I think we should go.
Okay. I see I've got about 11 minutes to go. The next one, if we could, let's do event centers in the county. And again, this is the one, are we barking up the right tree? And if so, are we pointed in the right direction? So with this one, again, just review. The purpose is the same as the other one. The overview, this is what we'll go through, very similar to what we just did. So in terms of process, where we are on this one is that you've saw this at a couple of staff meetings. Then we took it to advanced plans. they have had a number of meetings, and you'll see that later on in this presentation, that very robust conversation. And I think that this one has been so robust because similar to the other one, but maybe to a more intense level, this one kind of pits the ability of someone to move out into the country and use in the county and use the land however they want versus the ability of someone to move out in the county, use the land the way they want and enjoy peace and quiet because it's a country setting, right? And so you kind of inherently you have this kind of not conflict necessarily, but this rub that happens. So they've been wrestling with this one for a while. And so now we'll bring it to you to touch base just on where we are. So in terms of background, in 2016, there were changes to the zoning code. And if a property was less than 20 acres, then they could do an event center with a conditional use. If it was more than 20 acres, no need to come visit us. They can do it by right. The other thing too is that in 2023, we were hearing a number of complaints and that carried forward into 2024. And then we had the different staff meetings that you can see here. And this is more in detail. I'm not going to go through all that, just to know that it's there. So what is an event center? It's a premise that's frequently rented out for public or private events that are not open to the public on a daily schedule, and other than when the events are scheduled. So essentially, just think of someone taking money for providing the service of hosting an event at a place. So it's permitted in the following districts by right, and then it is permitted in rural residential, which is where we see most of the ones in the county. Again, if it's greater than 20 acres by right, if less than a conditional use. There's lots of stipulations on this condition. So there's parking, there's lighting that's already in place. And here's just in case anyone wants it, this is where it's referred to in the Unified Zoning Code. So as part of the research, we looked at other communities. We put together a white paper. I think that's attached in your packet. As part of our survey results, we found that the majority of counties at the time, and that was back in 2024, didn't have any regulations, but there sure were a lot of them that either had just gotten them in place or were working on regulations. So Sedgwick County is not alone in trying to figure out what's the best fit for the community on this one. Likewise, there's a national document with information about practices and actually cites some communities here in Kansas as part of that. So possible changes. So this is what's being discussed and deliberated. So there are three things potentially here. One is the Unified Zoning Code, one is the comprehensive plan, and the third is the possibility of a permit. And we'll talk more in depth about that, but just know the three separate possible documents. So zoning. So with this one, minimum property size is one of the items that's really been interesting to consider. So right now, if it's less than 20 acres, you can do a conditional use, and that could allow you to have it on a very small property. This would change it to where there's a minimum requirement of a number of acres. Initially, the discussion started at 40 acres. Then after some deliberation with advanced plans, I think they've arrived at somewhat at 20 acres. And there was a lot of discussion about this one. And the reason why first the 40 acres was proposed, or at least a minimum size, is because often light, noise, activities going on, disturbances to the adjacent properties, the larger you get the property, the more space you provide between the property and its neighbor. The question of how big to make it, we started out with 40 acres just because that's kind of an easy division of land that you kind of see throughout the county. 20 acres was suggested instead because of the financial feasibility of owning and operating and starting one of these things. The item being that if it's a smaller piece of property, it's more financially viable to operate one and pay off the loans and all that kind of stuff for the property. So right now we're at 20 acres. It causes some interesting things later on, and we'll talk about that needs to be reviewed. So again, the recommendation would keep by right in those zoning districts below. It would be a conditional use by rural residential. So any property in rural residential would require a conditional use under this proposed change. And then a site plan would be required, of course. Existing setbacks. Okay, so currently it's 200 feet from the property line and 300 feet from other residential dwellings. The proposed, okay, so this is actually, I'm sorry, this is what's proposed initially was 200 feet and then 300 from other residential dwellings. After talking with the advanced plans, they recommended and talked about recommending decreasing the property acreage to 20, but increasing the setbacks. And again, this is something that we still need to have some more conversations on. Here's what it would look like in practice. So this is a 40-acre property. You can see the setbacks there of the 200 feet. And then the one that kind of this cone kind of shape, that's 300 feet because we were taking it from a residence on that adjoining property. So that's kind of how it looks. With the increase if we increased it to the 400 and 600 feet, you can see how much more of the property that takes up with the setbacks. This is on a 40-acre property. The challenge that we run into is if you go to a 20-acre property, you just simply can't use it because the setbacks almost overlap. So more discussion that we need to have and talk about this one, but you can see the relationship between minimum property size and setbacks. Okay, this is a slide that we've got to add some more info. Didn't quite get that one done. Okay, so maximum number of guests. So this has been part of it since the beginning since one of the discussions with the staff meeting is to limit it to no more than 299 guests unless they get a permit. And I think the issue there is just simply the size of some of the events that have taken place in the county in the past. And then also hours of operations, just in general. In addition to the hours of operations, I don't believe I went that detailed. In the document, the text itself, you will see that there's hours of operations, but then there's also hours of outdoor noise. And I believe we've also got hours of indoor noise. Not provided all that, but just know that these are the hours of operation. Screening, this is a little bit different than what's in place today. Screening would not be required unless determined by the Planning Commission or the governing body. Right now, we do require screening. In this case, because the acreage has a minimum acreage size, we thought that screening could be done away with, except in cases where, maybe it's next to a residence or something that was needed. And then site plan, of course, would be required. So that's what I've got for the zoning overview. In terms of the comprehensive plan, we are proposing or recommending, well, it's discussing at this time, that there would be language inserted in the comprehensive plan to provide guidance for staff when we're evaluating these things. And then the idea of the permit is this would be separate from the zoning code. And really, this would be about if you want to have more than 299 people at an event, you would apply and you would get a permit. And that would give us an opportunity to go through the specifics about how's the traffic going to be handled, where is everyone going to be, all that kind of good stuff. So anyway, that's where we are. I'm going to stop there because we've got a lot more information, but it's in your packet. Yeah. And I'll just see, are we in the right direction?
Okay. Questions, direction for Scott? See, advanced plans is not taking us back up until October. Is that correct?
I think they deferred it because they wanted to have allow for this dialogue to take place.
So the projected dialogue with the staff meeting is this staff meeting or a future staff meeting that we'd like to?
Just this one, unless you all would like us to return. Yep.
Okay. Thoughts?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think we have time to discuss it today, but I had some ideas on how to handle the noise discussion. I don't think we actually ever resolved, unless there was just total opposition here. I don't know if that was the case, but I guess I'm more concerned about the other effects of this. But noise does carry over property lines, and again, I actually think that the occupancy is a little bit difficult to enforce. I don't know how you do that exactly, but I think that the sound issue, I don't mind having something in code that says what the sound should be after a certain time of day, and let it be a civil, handled in the civil courts, if you will, if there's a violation. I don't want to get into enforcement of that, but I do think having it written, there's a standard by which if they believe there's violations that they could go through civil actions and find remedy through courts. But I think there's a way to do that. I know it's complicated, but I don't think we have time to resolve that today.
Thank you very much. I do want to just highlight that noise is addressed. It may not be addressed the way that you like, but I just want to point out it's there. We can certainly have future conversations on it. So thank you.
Okay. Has Sheriff been involved in these conversations?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
So he's been able to provide his recommendations and.
Yes, I don't know that they're thrilled about the opportunity to go out and do noise monitoring, but yeah, but they have been involved and
Okay.
I think they see the logic.
So I think some of these discussions around size, 20 acres, the setbacks, I think that's helpful. So I want to chew on this a little bit more, and I do want to. I don't know if another staff meeting is needed in this regard, but I think there's some things that we do have to iron out. I do want to maybe visit a little bit with staff and kind of figure out where everybody's heads are at around this. But they're not done yet, obviously, but I think we're heading in the right direction. But there might be we need to finagle some of these details. So, okay, this is a good update because this tells us kind of where people's heads are going.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And we'll continue to work with advanced plans. So you may see something that is built off of this.
Okay. Yeah.
I do want to continue the
Yes, sir.
conversation on this. I don't know that I need another staff either, but I think this is something positive that, we can advocate for the area and the rural areas, but I want to be very careful about the parties and the infringing on the neighborhoods and the other people around that, because we've had some stuff happen that we don't want to see replicated.
Well, I am sorry, my time is up. If
Scott, what did you not get covered today that we need to bring you back for?
there are two items, if I could, sir, I think one only takes 2 minutes.
Sure.
And that is, one is notification. So the city of Wichita is very interested, and we won't even go through the PowerPoint or anything, but the city of Wichita is very interested in looking at sending mailed notices for zoning cases to properties if the property owner is not residing there. So currently, by state statute, zoning notifications go to the property owner. If their address is different than the property that they own, we can pretty much assume they're not living there. There's maybe a tenant or someone there. So the question for you all is the county interested in exploring that as well or not? And the reason why is because we're getting ready to take it to MAPC advanced plans. So I just want to make you aware that question has come up. I don't necessarily need an answer, but.
Okay. So you don't need an answer. It's that quick question. Is Wichita talking about sending it to the property and the property owner?
Yes, in instances where they don't match up. Yes.
Okay. So there'll be 2 mailings that would go out for that. Okay.
And there's an additional cost to the applicant because now they have to pull not just the owner's address, but also the property's address. So there's an incremental cost involved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if someone's living near the site, it's just signage only or still notification?
No changes to any of the other notification that would all still take place. It's just a matter of, do we want to add a letter to the property in instances where the owner's not there? Yeah. We can revisit this one. I know we're limited on time. And then the last one will be just an advertisement to let you know that MAPC Advanced Plans has been working on the airport hazard zoning code. It's a special zoning code separate from our regular zoning code. And what it does is it's intended to make sure that projects of a certain height or involving radio frequencies are reviewed with the FAA. They do a quick survey with the FAA to make sure that they're not going to cause any issues. That recommendation has come from the MAPC. It's coming to you and the city council. So that information is in your packet. Just want to let you know that that's coming.
Scott, thanks, bud. Appreciate it.
We'll schedule Scott again in September to come back, and I think the event center is a big enough issue. We might want to staff that one more time.
Yeah, I don't want to staff to death, but I do think that the planning commission and advanced plans, I think they need to hear some very specific things from the commission on how to develop this. Am I assuming that correctly? I think they need to hear some direction from the commission. So, okay, so let's do that in September. Is that okay? Let's try to hammer this thing out. You guys have been working on this for a while, and we want to give you the support you need. We want to give advanced plans the support they need to. So, and we'll have advanced plans come over in the room with us that day. And
Sure.
Okay.
Well, we can invite them.
Okay. Thank you.
And JR is
We can invite them. That's good to know. Well, hopefully they'll oblige. Okay, Tom.
All right, we'll shift gears to admin building now.
Hi, Tanya.
Hey, good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Tanya Cole. With me this morning, I have Justin Graham, President of Schaefer Architecture. And I also want to acknowledge Sarah Weisner, who is an architectural designer with Schaefer, as well as Andrew Diltz with Facilities, who's been part of this project. So if you recall back in May, you put a purchase agreement on Envision, and I told you we'd come back mid-August to present you with costs on remodel for the Envision building, as well as provide you with a building assessment and what those costs look like for the Envision building. So I sent you all, I think it was about a 130-page report that came from Schaefer that had some information on the building assessment. We'll get into that a little bit later. So you have that report, and then we'll also get into remodel costs. I'm going to kind of skip through the first few slides pretty quickly. Basically, there's slides that you've seen before on the admin building. Basically, it just talks about the reason why why we are looking for an admin building. It's because the need for space that was required for the public safety entities in the courthouse, and that is district court, DA, and sheriff, and it speaks to those numbers there. And the commission basically satisfied those needs. I think it was done this year, if I'm not mistaken, satisfied all those needs. And that started back in 2019 when we started with the adult detention facility. We did a small expansion onto the adult detention facility, and we started with remodeling the second and third floor of the DA. And we are now in the position where we have a first floor traffic courtroom on the first floor. And that started with the COVID response funding. And now we have 4 additional courtrooms in the in the courthouse. We have appellate court space, and then all of the entire second and third floor of the courthouse is now dedicated to the district attorney's office. So that is all due to the commission supporting those space needs for those public safety entities. In 2022, all of the admin space moved out of the courthouse, and that included finance, the clerk's office, county counselor, county manager, strategic communications, commission, treasurer, register of deeds, and human resources. As you know, we're in a lease. The lease here at Ruffin expires June 30th of 2028, and then we also have an early termination that we can get out June 30th, 2027 with written notice. Okay, so that now we're into what we need for a county admin space. You'll see that we've got some red numbers there. We've reduced that space summary because records management can now go into the new election space. So that reduced our space down to a gross area of 76,000 square feet, just a little bit over. So that's what we're looking for, total admin space for our needs. And then you'll see there that we've cut out records management. Again, those are all of the county departments that would move into the admin space. Same ones that I just listed off that moved out of the courthouse. And we're also going to move in a little portion of facilities. We'll have a lobby and some security screening, and we want to have a small cafe or market space. Back in 2018 is when we really started looking at buildings in earnest. Those are a listing of all of the buildings that we really took a good look at. And then in 2024, 2025, we looked at the Envision building. We know now that it's about a little bit over 74,000 square feet. There is a parking lot to the north there. There is one to the east. And then with the purchase agreement that we did in May, there is a vacant lot to the east. Okay, going to get into reviewing of the options. What I just mentioned, Envision, we did the purchase agreement May 14th. I do want to mention that our due diligence expires September 11th. And if we let that expire, then we go into closing 30 days after. And then the other option that we've talked often about is the new construction at 3rd and Main. And you'll see the square footage there of 76,000 square feet. And that is our current need. Okay, so for the Envision building, I mentioned that report that we did, that Schaefer did, that 130-page report. And so that included an architectural condition evaluation that was done by Schaefer, a structural condition evaluation done by Dudley Williams and Associates, HVAC and plumbing condition evaluation that was done by MEI, an electrical condition evaluation that was done by Integrated Consulting Engineering, elevator assessment report that was done by Otis Elevators, roofing report done by Mahaney Roofing, a phase 1 environmental site assessment that was done by our own environmental resources. MABCD took a cursory evaluation of the building, and then IT also went through the building and did an evaluation. So what we know is there's 5 stories to the building. It was constructed in 1977 through 78. It is occupied for business use. Floors 1 through 5 is occupied. There is a basement also, and then just that date again on due diligence. So I'm going to hand it over to Justin. He's going to give you a bulk of the presentation. He will go over floor plans, construction cost, and life cycle cost, and then I'm going to come back at the end and give you a total summary of the costs.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to be with you here in person this week. I'd just like to say on behalf of Schaefer, we're very appreciative of the opportunity to help Sedgwick County with this task over the past several years, looking at programming and the planning process. I know this is an important decision for the county, and so we are here to help, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that you may have. So we'll just dive right in. We have a number of slides here, and we'll start with the envisioned building analysis. So this is an overview of the property located there at Main and Pine to the northwest corner. There's 3 red boxes which outline 3 areas that are part of this plan. And you'll see first off in the upper left corner the idea of a new commission meeting space. And when I get back into the interior later, I'll make that connection. But the suggestion is that there's not ample square footage within the existing building for that BOCC meeting room as it was initially envisioned. And so this would capture the option to do some new construction on the property there at the northwest corner. The building, envisioned building, is the L-shaped building here with the courtyard with the existing playground there. As I mentioned, there's 3 properties. Thinking in terms of parking, the north parking lot currently has about 16 spaces. The one in the middle has 56 spaces. And then there's a currently paved area at the south end of this section of land here that has 42 spaces. We would envision to achieve the parking count that you would want for the building that we would pave a new parking lot here in the grassy area. And so you would end up with about 180 parking spaces total for this option. Okay, so we're going to take a look at each of the floors. And some preliminary comments. We've not reviewed layouts with any department heads to this point. And the layouts that we've generated are, as we perceive, would fulfill the program requirements. That being said, we're not here today to look at these plans room by room. We don't have that much time. We'd be happy to do that another time. But there's several things we want to capture with these plans. First off, you're going to see a variety of colors as we progress through each floor. Each color is connected to a department or common spaces such as circulation or support spaces for the facility. You're going to see hatched regions. When I say hatched, I mean like you see the cross hatching here in this hallway space or in the stairs. There's a little different hatch pattern located there and throughout here and here and so on. And so those areas that are hatched are areas where we envision there being either no remodel work being necessary or minimal remodel work. It might just be finishes or something like that to connect newly remodeled adjacent spaces. You're also going to see the black lines that are within these clear areas where there's no hatching. Those are going to represent new walls or furniture. And then you're also going to see red dashed lines, and those are representing existing walls that would be removed as part of remodeling. And so, and this will connect later as we get into cost analysis and how much of the building is remodeled. But we wanted to give the impression of the extent of remodeling that we would envision to fulfill the program as it's
Hey,
designed.
Justin, real quick, can you,
Yes.
where's the front door here? Is it?
Yep. So, and I'll walk you through this floor. So the main entrance would be up
Got
here.
it. Thanks.
They're sliding doors, so they don't represent with nice swinging doors that you see on plans, but the main entrance is up here. And then there's an employee entrance here on the east side, north is up. So as you enter the building, if you envision today that there's a reception desk down at this lower portion, this is all corridor space, there's restrooms. You have this core of elevators here and stair behind, and then there's a stair located here and here throughout the building. So the first floor would include the treasurer's department, which is in the green color here at about 5,250 square feet. And that is all of this zone within that area. And then we would also include facilities on this floor located in the shade of yellow here. We have security in the charcoal gray here. And then we have what's currently a food prep kitchen in this location, or would envision becoming a market space. And then lastly, we have some available square footage down here at the northeast corner, or excuse me, southeast corner of the plan, which could be shared meeting space for the building. So as we move up to the second floor then, one point I'll make is that currently on every floor of the building, upper floors, when you step out of the elevators, there are no demising walls for various departments. It's all open and contiguous space. And so as we begin to occupy these floors with multiple departments and likely desire to have walls separating those, we would begin to create a more defined circulation area that would be walled off in front of the lobbies and throughout that circulation zone. So the second floor we're showing occupied by the clerk in the gray on this side, and Register of Deeds in this light brown color, I'll call it, in this portion of the plan. And this was probably the most challenging floor in terms of meeting the square footage requirements for each of those departments. But once we got in and started laying out the spaces, and we looked for opportunities maybe where they could share some meeting space, which is represented in this room right up here, would be a shared meeting space between these two departments, as well as some reduction in vault space of the Register of Deeds program. Since it was originally programmed, there's been some changes there with going to some more digitizing scanning of records. And so their footprint is shrinking some. And so those things allowed us to, we think, accommodate both these departments on this floor with some changes in square footage. And you can see shaded or hatched regions here. So these are some existing offices that we're able to maintain, but most of the rest of the floor you'll see is all new construction. Moving up to the third floor, we have the counselor department located on the upper portion in purple. And then we have human resources in this light gray zone over here, minus the HR training room, which we'll get to in the lower level of the facility. So again, you can see quite a bit of remodeling on this floor to make this happen, but we are able to preserve some existing offices down in this area of the plan and up here. Moving up to the fourth floor. Here we have the commissioners and the manager occupying this floor. So the commissioners are in the light blue region up here. And manager in the light gray over here. Again, you can see quite a bit of remodeling. There's some changes in the square footage to the commission program. When that was originally programmed, we envisioned, if you think back to the courthouse, the BOCC meeting room also doubled as a staff meeting room. And one of the desires of that programming was to have two separate spaces for that. So you'd have a more formal BOCC meeting space and you have a less formal staff meeting room of smaller area. And so that kind of stayed with the commissioner's square footage, but really that staff meeting room is a separate space that doesn't need to be within their footprint. And so if you were just comparing the program for commissioners of 9,340 square feet, what's shown here today is about 4,800 square feet. And that reduction is due to not including that staff meeting room within that square footage, and then also the BOCC meeting room within that space. One point I will make about the fourth floor is that the main restrooms here located in the middle of the plan while they've been updated for finishes, but they've not been updated for ADA. That's the only floor in the building that is that way. And so we would envision needing to address that ADA restroom issue on that floor. Moving to the fifth floor, this is all finance on this level in blue, and you'll see a variety of shaded regions and then the clear blue area. So again, the clear blue area is all new remodeled space, and the hatched regions are finishes or some remodeling of electrical for workstations or that sort of thing. But this floor has the least amount of remodel of any of the floors, and it's largely open space today, and they have a number of workstations. And so those two go hand in hand. What I will also point out about this floor is that there is a large break room located at the north end, newly renovated. And if I back up, part of making some of these departments fit within all the other floors would be removal of small break rooms within their footprint. We would envision maybe a coffee bar or something like that, but not a break room where they would go and sit and eat. And so the fifth floor would accommodate all the departments. There's two locations in the building. I'll get to the basement next, but this being one of them for a shared break room up here. So we'll take a look at the lower level next. Here you see in gray, we have the HR training room at the lower right corner of the plan. And then the rest of it is all green, which is mechanical, some meeting spaces, storage spaces. Here's the other large break room within the building that could be shared by all that runs adjacent to the training room. And then up here where they have some art studios today, which we would envision could be remodeled into conference spaces that could be shared by all the occupants. Okay, so as we look at costs for this option, we have an initial building purchase of what we understand to be $11,950,000. We talked about the additional parking lot that we would create, and looks like we've got a little bit of a discrepancy here. So the additional parking lot here would be a line item of 44,000 square feet at $9 a square foot, which would be $396,000. Actually, if you reverse these labels, so if we put a parking lot lighting up here, that would be an allowance of here it is below. Okay, so let's scratch that line right there. So we have additional parking lot of 396,000. We have additional lighting for the new parking area of an allowance of $80,000. That could be optional. There's not lighting on that parking lot today, but we wanted to put that there for your consideration. We have an interior remodel of 50,500 square feet. And so as we talked about, actually the existing interior area of the building is 70,000 square feet. So we're looking at remodeling about 72% of it with this 50,500 square foot number. We would see that at $180 a square foot for roughly $9 million. Mentioned earlier on the site plan about the possibility of a new BOCC meeting room built on the north end of the property. So 5,475 square feet at $600 a square foot is roughly $3.3 million. Then we have some maintenance items associated with initial construction. The exterior, we believe all the precast paneling that finishes out the exterior of the building needs to be caulked. And we did see some areas where there, if you step back and look at the building, you can see in some similar spots on each of the precast panels where there's a little bit of spalling on those panels. And we think those are connection points where those panels are hung on the structure. There's probably been maybe a lack of keeping those caulk joints fresh. That's something that probably needs to happen every 10 years or so. As they age out, they dry and they crack, and then you end up with some moisture penetration. And so we think that's what's happening at those locations. So we would want to take care of that up front. Elevator modernization. So elevators work today, but they are the main pieces of equipment are quite old, and replacement parts are either non-existent or will be very hard to get. And so we would suggest considering a modernization of those elevators with the initial construction to the tune of about $850,000. The courtyard is a wonderful playground today that didn't quite fit your program. So we might be able to keep some of the paved areas. There's some fun patterns and maybe some therapeutic walks to go out at lunch and follow the trail or whatever, but that's going to need some work. And so we envision about $43,000 for that. And then the fourth floor currently is not sprinklered. That's the only floor of the building that's not sprinklered. And reason being is the fourth floor it's been updated for finishes, but it has not received any significant remodeling over the years. So the floor plan's pretty much as it was on day one. As they've remodeled all the other floors of the building, they've come in and sprinklered those at that time. So that's something that you would need to do for this initial construction. Mechanical, replacing the chillers, they are nearing end of life. And so while the building's empty, that's probably the best time to go in and do that work. And so $245,000 a piece at $490,000. And then lastly, given back to the fourth floor, having received the least amount of attention, we believe that the VAV system up there is probably going to need a little more attention than some of the other mechanical areas of mechanical in the building. So we have a $20 square foot allowance for that. So our grand total for initial cost with the Envision building is roughly $26,500,000. Okay, so next we're going to look at new construction, and Third and Main, as Tanya mentioned earlier, we have an updated square footage for that by removing the records management department. And this series of slides is original as presented for this. So these have not been updated to reflect the square footages, but just talking through the site again, this would be located at 3rd Street and Main Street at the southwest corner of the property. New footprint for admin building here, surrounded by parking. There's an existing parking lot there today. We have potential for a loading zone here off of Main and some secured parking located here. Total spaces, and this is more of a campus feel, right? So this is what one of the achievements of this location is, that it creates a campus with your administrative departments in the Ronald Reagan building adjacent to it here. But a total parking count of just shy of 300 spaces And that would be serving both buildings. To achieve that, we would need to do some on-street parking. And so the thought is to reduce Third Street to 2-lane with parallel parking on both north and south sides. And then Water Street along here to the west, creating some diagonal parking along the east side of that street. So we'll look at each floors of this option. First floor main entrance is located up here. You see the double doors. And then we would envision an employee entrance down here and potentially another one for loading over here. So as you enter the building, we have the cafe, we have a generous lobby space, the idea of a stair up to the second floor, and this is all open to above. The first floor would include a new BOCC meeting room in the southwest corner. And then on the east side, through the core of the building, then we've got elevators and mechanical and restrooms and stairs. And then on the east side, we have the treasurer and we have facilities and then security located here. This gets some of the more higher visited spaces, public visited spaces with the BOCC meeting room and treasurer located on the first floor. Moving up to the second floor, as I mentioned, this portion is open to below. And so on this floor, we have the clerk in the lower left corner and register of deeds along the right side. And we do have some available area that could potentially be shared meeting space for the building. Moving up to the third floor, then we have, this is the full footprint for the building at 19,045 square feet on the upper two floors. Their third floor would include finance on the left side and HR on the right side. And then looking at the top floor of this option, we have the manager in the upper left, we have counselor in the lower left, and then commissioners on the right side. And so with this option for a new build, we've achieved all the adjacencies between departments that we were aspiring to achieve in the first, or when we programmed the building. Lastly, not to forget the lower level, as I mentioned, these slides have not been updated. So records management is no longer part of this picture. So you could just ignore that purple strip on the right side, but we would still have a core of mechanical and electrical spaces in the lower level. Okay, costs for this option. Anticipated cost of land to build on is $1,620,000. We have that new square footage at 76,560 square feet, which excludes records management at $395 a square foot, so just north of $30 million. Site improvements, as I mentioned, new parking and some greenery and that sort of improvements, $10.50 a square foot, so roughly $467,000. And then restriping of those streets, as I mentioned before, an allowance of $30,000. So this option brings us in just north of $32 million. Okay, what might this look like? I think you've seen this before, but this depicts a modern office government building situated there at 3rd and Main. This view here would be looking at the main entrance, kind of the northwest corner of the building there. And so use of materials of stone around the base, which is a very monumental government type of building type of material, white metal panels, which again to relate to the white Ronald Reagan building adjacent to the west. And then a lot of glass, obviously, with bringing in a lot of natural lighting and the idea of transparency with the government facility. Okay, so we have one more building option. This is going to look at a reduced square footage for new construction. And so what this would include, or would we remove from the building, would be the row offices of treasurer, clerk, and register of deeds, along with records management, as we already discussed. And so this would bring us down to 54,350 square feet. And Tanya's going to talk in a minute about alternate locations for those departments that we would remove from this facility. So this one, lower level, there's kind of a clean view of what that would look like in either scenario without the records management. So you still have that core of mechanical and electrical spaces down there. And then moving up to the first floor, this looks just as the previous version did, same square footage. The only difference here is that with removal of treasurer from the right side, we're suggesting the counselor in that area of the floor plan. And then we move up to second floor. So this is the floor that's open to below. Here in this area, this would now be the manager's office in the lower left corner and commissioners along the right side. Still have that available square footage up here for some potential shared meeting space or other. And then the third floor, which is now the top floor of this option, would include finance on the left and HR on the right, with some available square footage in between. So we've gone from a 4-story building to a 3-story building and updated costs associated with that. We still have the land cost that remains the same at 1.6 million. The new square footage of 54,350 at $395 a square foot translates to about $21.5 million. Site improvements remain the same. Very similar, should be the same actually, at roughly 400 and I look back on the previous slide. $467,000 and then an allowance of $30,000 for restriping, which gives us a rough total of $23,500,000. Okay, Tanya's going to speak to this slide.
So on this particular less square footage third and main option, we just want to make sure that we capture if the row offices do not go in the third and main option, we'll have to find a spot for them. So we believe we can capture space for them in the Ronald Reagan building. So if we were to move them in the Reagan building, then we would take out ComCare admin and CDDO and aging. And I think we can find space for ComCare admin and CDDO in ComCare crisis or Park Valley. However, there's also that option for the ComCare complex. So there's kind of a lot of caveats in this particular slide. So you can see there's a couple of asterisks there. So basically what we did for costs there is kept that unit cost of $180 a square foot for remodel. But what we believe is we're probably going to only remodel maybe 50% in Reagan and probably 50% in those other buildings because we're going from office space to office space. However, we've not evaluated those buildings, but that's probably the practicality of those spaces. So just understanding that there will be some remodels in those 3 buildings. We've captured about 3.2 million for that.
Is it appropriate, Tanya, if you look at the new building costs and this reduced footprint, 23.5 million, that we need to be thinking this is really 26.7 million,
Correct.
26.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Just I want to, for the public to understand, we need to be thinking that this is a $26 million project, not.
Yes. And you will see that, Chairman, when we go to capture the costs that we've added in those additional construction costs. Okay. And then now we're going to get into life cycle cost adjustment.
Okay, so one of our tasks was to do a 50-year life cycle cost for all scenarios. And there's a lot of numbers here. I'm not going to read line per line on every page, but I'll just try to draw some highlights. Beginning with the Envision building, of course, you have parking lot maintenance over time of roughly $170,000. We've got, and what we tried to do, so these are not total maintenance costs for the buildings, over 50 years. What these are, we tried to pull out the things that are going to be different between the three buildings so that you can compare, and leave the things that are the same. Those are not represented on these slides. So just trying to draw comparisons to difference in costs between the three options. So we have window gasketing that we know will need some attention. Roof replacements. The difference here between the Envision building, it's 5 stories. It's a smaller footprint, less roof area. So you've got smaller roof to replace than at 3rd and Main. So if you were to go through and do a comparison to all 3 scenarios, you'd see some differences there. And really we're at the total that we'll get to in the end is what is the important number for you to see. Some caulking, we talked about that. And I apologize, just did discover a revision this morning after your packets were sent out again. And so we'll send out an updated sheet, but the chiller replacement here, we had allowing 4 times. So what we have, we have quantities in this column, we have cycles. This is like the number of times that you would have that cost over 50 years. And then we have the unit costs for those. And so we had initially identified the chiller replacement for Envision being 4 times. And that would be in the scenario if we didn't replace them on day 1. And so, but as you saw on the initial costs for Envision, we did suggest replacing the chillers on day 1. So this number should reduce to 2 instead of 4, which will reduce that number by $490,000. It would be half that. So that would be $490,000. We then also had mechanical chiller maintenance, which is a hefty number of doing that twice a year on 2 chillers at $5,000 a piece. However, in all 3 building scenarios, we're going to do that. We're going to have that same chiller maintenance cost. So we would like to strike this line from the life cycle cost. And you'll find when we get to the next options that those chiller maintenance costs are not reflected there. So they're not going to be reflected in any 3. So as we move through this towards a total, and you've got a lot of other just typical mechanical maintenance costs, you're going to see in the different options where there's maybe some different quantities based on building configuration or size of the building. We get to the next slide. We've got pump rebuilds. We have DDC replacement, controllers and software, which is a hefty number. But here on this slide where we have the total estimated major maintenance, so $5,711,000 with those revisions that we just made this morning, those would become, or that number should be $4,721,806. So it's a difference of $990,000, so nearly $1 million. And we'll try to update you on those numbers as we move through the slides here. So the next line item is estimated utility costs, and the Reagan building currently, we looked at the past 3 years or so of utility costs. It's coming in at about $1.80 a square foot. One difference with that building is that it's electric reheat, so there's no gas at all, with exception of the generator. There's a generator that sits just outside the building, which is a natural gas fueled generator, but the rest of the building is all electric. So there we're looking at $1.80 a square foot of roughly $6,147,000 over 50 years. Then we look at if we were to build the new BOCC meeting room, we got that 5475 over 50 years. That one we rated at $1 a square foot. That's because it's new construction, and then also that building would likely not be it wouldn't be occupied 5 days a week as a special meeting room. You'd probably have some setbacks where it is would use less energy. So a grand total on that one with the revision to the upper number would be 37,682,716 at the bottom in lieu of this number.
That 38.37 million. Auto and 50 years of life cycle,
Correct.
23 million plus everything else.
Correct. Yes. Okay, moving to option one for Third and Main. Again, I'm not going to run through all of these numbers, but some of the differences you'll see just in some size of parking lot. We've got roof replacement, a little bigger square footage on roof, so a little heavier on the roof replacement costs. Down here, we've got boiler replacement. And so on the new build, we would envision both gas and electric. So no electric reheat. We would use traditional boilers for heating. So there is some boiler replacement costs that are not apparent in the envisioned building. And if we look at the total of that, then we have maintenance and upgrades over 50 years, roughly $5.4 million. And that would be compared to the envisioned building that we just spoke of $4.7 million. Here, we're able to be a little more efficient with new construction and combination of gas and electric. And so we're looking at $1.20 a square foot per year for utility costs. So this number is just under 4.6 million, where we were more like 6.4 million with the envisioned building. And for a grand total of 42,409,770. And then the third option, again, the differences you're going to see here, smaller footprint. So a lot of these mechanical replacement costs are going to be less because there's fewer components to replace. But much same gas, electric, same type of mechanical maintenance items across 50 years, same roof size, less windows on the second option because we're 3 stories instead of 4 stories. And looking at the totals on this one, then we have major maintenance upgrades of $4,530,000. Estimated utility costs, that remains at $1.20 a square foot. On the smaller footprint is about $3.2 million for a grand total of about $37 million. I'm going to let Tanya finish this out here.
Okay, so we have given you a lot of information, and what I tried to do here was summarize all that in one slide. Typically, when we come to you with a CIP project, we come with total costs, and what I refer to that as project costs. So that will include your construction cost and then owner's costs. So owner's costs include if we're buying land and building new, or if we're purchasing a building and then remodeling. So those are in your owner's costs, and then architectural and engineering fees, furnitures, fixtures, and equipment, which is referred to as FF&E, project contingency plan review, permits, signage, anything like that, that's in our owner's costs. So I've broken down each option by construction cost and then owner's cost. And then your project cost are those 2 items totaled together. So that's your project cost. And then Justin walked you through your 50-year cycle. So your total cost is taking your project cost plus your 50-year cycle and taking that together, that's your total cost. So for each option, then that's laid out. So your envisioned project cost is 30.5 million. Your total cost then, and I'm going to correct it because he had that little error that he discovered this morning. So your envisioned total cost is 41.7 million. For Third and Main option all square footage. Project cost is 39.3 million. Total cost then is 49.4 million. Then your third main less square footage option. Project cost is 32.2 million. And you'll see that that includes that additional construction cost that we'd have to do at Reagan and then the other county buildings. And then your total cost is 40 million. So this gives you everything apples to apples for all your options. So the only other thing I will say on Envision is right now we're still in due diligence. If we don't do anything, we would go straight into your closing. We don't have to do anything.
Okay.
Okay. So Justin and I are here, Andrew's here, Sarah's here. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, I'm sure there's a few. Let me first say, Tanya, Andrew, thank you. This has been a big lift. And you guys have worked really hard on this, and we appreciate all the work and all the departments that have helped in the due diligence period. It's been a quick due diligence. So I just want to publicly thank you guys for the work you did. Justin, thank you for the work you and your firm have done to help. It is nice having an architect here today because I think there's some questions that might help us arrive at some of these costs. Obviously, we start looking at 50-year life cycle costs, and when you throw that in with the construction cost, we're obviously buying Envision, and that's added in. But these numbers tell a story that I actually wasn't expecting. I anticipated some things that were different. There's also some assumptions too at Third and Main that I think could be that I want to ask you about. One is the $1.6 million land cost. That is at appraised value. Is that correct, of the land for the parking lot at Third and Main? Are we arriving at that number based on?
If you don't mind, I'm gonna let the
The
manager.
number
figure
that we asked about 2 years ago and was given to us by city manager and city property management at the time.
Okay. I think that number's worth discussing. And I think that we can have discussions with the electeds over there, what that looks like. As taxpayers, we'll be buying from taxpayers, the same taxpayers. So that's a conversation I think we can still have. Justin, that's a beautiful building, the design. But I've been involved in commercial real estate before. When we do a lot of glass, it raises the cost of the project. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are there other designs that could be a really big, beautiful building that would lower the costs on the exterior of the building if we didn't do as much glass?
Most certainly.
Okay. Do you have any idea to give us any guidance of what that could look like if we're trying to get a little bit closer in range to?
In terms of cost per square foot?
Yes.
Or,
I'm putting you on the spot here, but I know that we're looking right now, just to be frank, we're looking at a $30 million construction cost with a bunch of beautiful glass and a big, beautiful building. And I'm curious what the range is there if we cost engineer down to something that still looks absolutely terrific, but maybe does not use as much glass.
yeah, I mean, I think potentially in the 375 a square foot range. If we were single story, we'd be less than that. But when we go vertical, we start adding stairs and elevators, and
Right.
that cost is higher. So where we presented 2 years ago was $375 a square foot. And really this number has been, it
Carried over.
represents some inflation over the last 2 years. So, but just spitballing, I would say maybe 375 a square foot.
Okay.
If we cheapen the exterior.
Okay.
I don't want to use the word.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Made it less expensive.
It's very good. Okay, let's open up to questions and I'll circle back with a few more, but any other questions?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm trying to do the best apples to apples comparison I can. And I even go back to the architectural cost and estimates. And in my head, I'm reviewing back to the Riverside summary as well. And I know that we had a lot of unknowns and added costs there. And I don't have that in front of me, but I'm just trying to understand to make sure everything's being presented exactly the same, because some of it seems like it just doesn't seem like apples to apples. Can you help me connect the dots a little bit?
Between Riverside and here?
All three projects, yeah. It seems like the methodology is different for each and every project.
Okay, well, so what I would begin with Riverside was that was I would say a higher level look at that project. Okay, we didn't get into as much analysis on that facility. That was a broad brush stroke to begin a conversation about whether or not you want to consider the admin building or the Riverside building. We have maintained remodel costs similar of $180 a square foot across all of these options. Here we have new construction costs that's thrown in. We have higher new construction costs for a BOCC meeting room. When you look at that smaller footprint on the north side of the building with an auditorium space and plumbing of restrooms and things like that, it's going to be higher cost per square foot. That was $600 a square foot. But then we look at the rest of the typical office remodel, or excuse me, new construction of $395. And we've tried to be as apples to apples as we can be across these three options between Envision and Third and Main. When you look at the utility costs that we've compared, and you look at all of the life cycle costs that we've considered. So I may be missing.
I guess Envision, we don't have a lot of the unknowns. I'm assuming because you've really sharpened your pencil and you feel like we're going to be able to stay within in this. It doesn't seem like we're allowing much for the unknowns, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean, we feel like with our due diligence and you guys have put the work in that you shouldn't be coming back and say, hey, I'm just with my city experience. A lot of times we come back, hey, we're going to do change orders. We got to do this. And it ends up being a lot more than what we estimated. And it doesn't seem like, it seems like a pretty lean estimate, I guess, is my perspective.
Okay. Well, these are estimates, as you know, and so we're doing our best to estimate based on the knowns. We have done recent due diligence work of walking through the building. Structurally, that building is very solid. We're not seeing like evidence of foundations that are heaving or sinking or anything like that. So the building's been well maintained over the years. That's evident. It's been remodeled multiple times over the years. That one example that I did point out on the exterior that we saw a little bit of spalling on the precast panels is something that's probably had some negligence that needs some attention. But interior wise, given that it's been remodeled numerous times and within more recent years, the last decade or so, we feel more confident that there's more of those unknowns that have been addressed through that process. It's just a fresher.
I'm going to let the other commissioners speak, but I guess my summary so far is whatever action we take, whatever project we do, I want a hard line in the sand that says we are not going to exceed this math right here.
One quick question that I think I may know the answer to, but I think it might be helpful for the public and others in the room. For the new BOCC meeting room that's proposed on the Envision building, we have $1 per square foot of $600 per square foot for that estimated cost. For the new admin building cost, we have that at $395 per square foot. I'm assuming that's economy of scale for a smaller building, but what else can for $200 more per square foot, can you kind of explain that?
Sure. So, that's that $395 a square foot is an average across the entire building. Within that, you have some open office space. That's maybe $300 a square foot. And you've got X number of square feet of that. And you've got a smaller footprint you have an expensive BOCC meeting room within that building that would exceed $395 a square foot for that construction alone. But when you look at an average across the entire building of less expensive office space versus spaces like that would be the reason.
I know that this includes the FF&E, and this is an expensive room, we'll say, for seating and FF&E and all of that. But I guess, is there some value engineering that could be done on that number, or what is this? I don't see a picture of it. So are we envisioning something that's matching the building that's currently there? Are we bringing in all glass, or can you kind of explain what the finished
Yes,
product would be?
so we haven't explored visually what that would look like yet. We've just kind of used some historical numbers and basis of judgment for what that cost per square foot would be. But, we would certainly want to blend with the existing building. I think that we do have, given the proximity of that building, the new addition to the existing building, there are some code things where we'd look at some rated exterior walls potentially on the south side of that. So we might look at more opaque on the south side as well as on the west side, right along the sidewalk. But probably quite a bit of glass on the east side of that building, and the parking was located on the east side. So that would be more of the front entrance to the building, we would imagine.
One last one, I promise.
Sure.
Is this the cost that you're seeing buildings of this size? Maybe if you do a comp on other things you've worked on, is that the price per square foot that those have been costing?
Yeah, and I wish we could say we built 10 of the same footprint, and we would know, right? But we do a lot of office space, and so we look at costs for that, multi-story. And we've talked to contractors throughout this process and gotten feedback from them on what they think costs per square foot are. And so we've tried to apply as much advice and comparison as we can.
Commissioner Hall?
Chairman, just a few questions. The Envision building today, what's the square foot? I'm a little confused because I see different figures on the paper, so please clarify.
So the exterior footprint that noted. So the interior square footage of the Envision building is roughly 70,000 square feet. The exterior, when you look at the total asset of that building, is bigger. And if you picture that building, the windows are sunken in, right? And so from the interior, those walls are straight up and down. So your interior square footage is less than your exterior. So I think if I find the right slide to find the square footage.
Slide 10 maybe?
Sorry. So on slide 10, it was listed as 74,860 square feet. That would be an exterior asset of the building.
Okay, and then to that, we would add the 5475 for the.
Correct. So you'd be looking at, and I did that math, it's 80,335 square feet.
One more time.
80,335 square feet.
Okay, so all of our analysis should be using that number minus whatever you lose a little bit for the thickness of the walls or whatever you mentioned it. So what's the usable interior? Then adding the chambers, but subtracting out the thickness of the walls or whatever.
Yeah.
What's our interior total?
I don't have at hand the interior square footage for the BOCC meeting space. I could get there with a little bit of time here, but again, you'd have 70,000 square feet for the Envision building, and then
It's about 75,000 square feet roughly.
plus the BOCC.
Well, that's what I'm saying with the
Oh,
70,000
sorry. Yes, correct. Yeah.
interior for the
I'd say 74 to 75,000 square feet.
I think the analysis needs to use that number for us to understand the apples to apples comparison, because and again, so on the new construction at Third and Main, are you using interior numbers for those descriptions, or is that something else?
So for costs, we are using exterior numbers.
One of my confusions on the Third and Main, the very first picture of that one on slide number 12, or I should say page 12, slide, I'll show you what the slide number is. 23, it looks like. The yellow footprint says 84.4, but on the previous slide, it says 76,560.
Yes. So again, this Apologies, but this was not updated from the original presentation that was made before we removed records management.
So it's really 76,560.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And is that, when we look at the comparisons at the end of the booklet here, is that the numbers being used for, so I think we're using 84. I have to go back and look at this, but I think we're using 84. We are. I think we are.
I think we're using the 76,560 on option one
Okay.
and then the 56.
Okay. I accept that. That's great. Okay, then a couple of other questions here. What pages here? 72% estimation for remodel of the Envision building.
Mhm.
That's a nice number, but is that a maximum number or is that is there a range we might expect or?
I think we would be in that 70% range based on our initial, again, we have not met with department heads. And so per our recommended layout. Now, not to say there aren't opportunities to work with each department and look at the existing plans and say, oh, well, maybe we could utilize this existing room for this purpose or something like that.
So it's my goal, I guess, to fit the building as much as possible and move what we have to move, but not, if we can find a way to configure to fit the building, I would like to at least try to do that to minimize this number. I know in my reference point is the Reagan building, there was an initial estimates to remodel all 6 floors, and we ended up doing something drastically different called the paint and carpet plus. It's not the best building. It's got low ceilings, and it's some of the building we did not remodel it. There was a plan to tear out walls. We ended up not doing some of that, so it's not configured perfectly. But I've noticed that we're using the building, and it seems to work okay. So again, I think the 72% is negotiable. But again, it sounds like if we don't involve ourselves too much in this, we might use that number for these estimates. But I guess my point is, I think it could be less than that number. If you do a new build, there's really not a great way to make it less unless we change the design. I mean, like take out the windows, for example, might be a way to reduce some cost there. But the new construction is more of a fixed cost, I think, than the remodeling. Another example of that might be, I'm just curious when the elevators were redone, because I was under the impression that they're not, hasn't been that long since they've been worked on. That's nearly $1 million to this refurbishment is to mess with these elevators, and I don't know that they really. I've been in them once we toured the building, and
So
they were very nice, I thought.
There have been some cosmetic upgrades. There's been some replacement of some components. But if you read the Otis's report, they recommend that it's end of life, hard to find parts. And so you don't have to do that on day one. You can do that down the road. But, if the building's vacant, you don't have any downtime with elevators and people trying to use elevators if you do it while it's vacant. And so the other part of that estimate too, currently the elevators are not used for emergency egress for the building. MABCD might have a different opinion on how those should be utilized or able to be used. And so there is some cost assumed for potential rework there.
I'll say also, I guess it's been a goal that's been stated this entire time. We've been talking about this the entire time I've been a commissioner. And one of the goals was to have a campus-like setting. I think keeping our row offices with us was one of our goals. So to me, I guess I just reject the less square footage on the front. I don't know why we're even looking at that at all. To me, it's not a configuration that we should ever support. And I think that the unknown costs of having to translate them to other buildings, and who knows what the ripple effect of that is, and maybe someone else is moving out. So it's leases or purchases, and there's costs we just don't know what that is. And to me, it doesn't fit the mission of putting all this in one building, which is our project statement from the very beginning was bringing us all together. So I don't like the idea of the lesser square footage. But let me just point out that the difference in those two buildings, the Third and Main, the larger building and the smaller building, is a 30% difference. And even the smaller building is more comparable in cost to what we're talking about in Envision. But in Envision, we're we're checking all of the boxes, whereas the new construction, we're not. Because if you look at the larger building, it's clearly about 25% more cost. Unless you pick a smaller building, at which point you're building 30% less building. So in either case, it's more expensive or less space. And I think the less space, there's cost, there's no way to really know what the ripple effect of that would be. So I don't know. I would also say the advantage of a new building is obviously the energy efficiency that it might have, although I would question all that glass being more energy efficient. But having said that, we're trading, if you will, a potential cost for purchase and reconstruction, which we might be able to pare that down. And it's not as energy efficient, but the break even point is in the distant future, like 50 years from now. Only because the energy costs are different. So you're buying a more expensive building, but you make it back up in utility savings, and your break even point is 50 years from I don't know, but that's multi-generational. I would just say that putting that burden of providing this space on this generation for what's going to be, enjoyed, if you will, two or three generations in the future is the break even point for that decision. I don't know that I can support that. So I'll just say this: I appreciate the presentation today. I am still not going to change my opinion. I don't think that these other the buildings at 3rd and Main interest me personally. I think it's been a great reminder of why we're not doing that, and I would suggest we continue to move on the path of Envision building. Thank you.
Okay. One thing too that I would, go Commissioner Meister. Forgive me.
That's right. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Yep, you're good.
So I'm just trying on that last slide. I got to about the same number, but I couldn't really understand exactly how we got to 42 million based on the other stuff. We bought the building for 11.9, something like that. Where's that number in the owner's cost? How come 11.9 went to 15.9?
Because it's got the additional down here, it's got the additional architectural and engineering fee.
Oh, okay.
Furniture, picture.
Okay.
Equipment, project contingency, those items included in the owner's cost.
Okay. And then my other question that none of us have brought up, but I thought it was known pretty publicly that the city has offered us the use of their chamber which is the $3.5 million. So if we took that off of the Envision price, that even comes down into the high 30s. And Justin, I appreciate how it was going to ask, but you commented. I was really glad to hear your opinion about the bones, basically, of the Envision building.
Sure.
So in your opinion, it's a solid building.
Yes.
And so that was helpful to hear. So a personal thought is I do think we can, and I don't want to do as hard a line in the sand as maybe is Commissioner, as Jeff was saying, but it seemed like a lot of money in this remodel stuff. And I know when we first were talking about some of this, some of us were talking on the side saying, all right, we're going to put a hard number in there. And that's what we're going to live with, that for remodel. I know that's maybe difficult, especially if you haven't talked to all the departments, this and that. But I think there could be, my hope is there could be some shaving or I don't know if the appetite of the commission is to give you all a hard number to say, this is what we're going to spend on remodel, and we're not going above it. And I'm talking, I'm not asking, I'm not trying to recruit an opinion here or not, but I do see that I don't, not knowing what the future is between the city and county and other merged services, and that especially when you're talking a 50-year life cycle, I'm really not a big fan of spending $3.5 million on another conference room, and I'd rather take that off as we make our final decision to what would happen. So, thank you for letting me make comments.
Commissioner?
I guess I would just like to leave it on the list. I don't think we need to make a decision on that today, correct? I mean, if we decide do we want to do that or not do that, we now make that decision after we close, if we were, whether we build the
Right.
the $5 million,
No,
5,000 square foot chambers,
It's a $3 million, yeah.
$3 million addition. That's a decision we can make in the future, right? And I just want to make one other point here. That is the parking differences between Third and Main versus the Envision building are very noteworthy. I know that the maintenance cost for our own parking lots is higher. That's a negative on the life cycle cost, but I think about the complexity of the parking plan over here on Third and Main, and it's on slide number 23. I just cringe when I look at that. We had a similar briefing on the Reagan building. Now, I can tell you this, I've been to the Reagan building lots of times where I couldn't find a place to park, and it hasn't worked out, I think, the way we had thought it was. And I just think that the parking plan at Third and Main is certainly not as good as what we'd have at the Envision building. Thank you.
Okay. One last thought, and then Lindsay, I got a question for you. I want to talk timing with you and Tanya. When we talk about campuses and things of that sort, we talk about that a lot around here. Third and Main obviously is a campus with Reagan and City Hall. You know, the Envision building is not too far off the campus beaten path. We're right across the street from 911, right across the street from the courthouse, right down the street from City Hall. So I think both options are good options in regards to checking that. And in regards to the commission chambers, the meeting room for the commission, I think the conversation can be separate. I don't think it has to be made immediately, but the discussion is certainly, I think we can work a deal with City of Wichita for some space, be either temporary or long-term, but also calculating if we do want to build our own space at some point in time, the longer we wait, the more it costs. So we need to, that's a separate conversation, but I think seeing these numbers now, compared to what they could have been 8 years ago, this is the taxpayer has paying more because of we have waited to not pull the trigger. I don't envision that's going to be the case this time. I think we're going to get a deal made here pretty quick. So I want to ask, due diligence expires September. We can do nothing and we move to closing, and then we move forward with Envision, correct? What is our bond timetable and when we have to get things done and decisions made? And
so you have, as of this morning, David Floyd, our wonderful principal analyst, has looked and said that we are at 14.4 million with the actual bond proceeds and the investment income that we have made on that since it has sat in the bank since October 2nd of last year. So that October 2nd date is important. We have 3 years from that October 2nd, 2024 date to spend 85% of that original 13.2 million bond issuance. And then we have 5 years from that date to spend 100%. And we have to show that we are doing due diligence to try and get those dollars spent in that time. So that's why we've asked to have these conversations that we can document.
And remind us what the obligation is here in the timing, either Lindsay or Tanya, for what we're doing here at Ruffin. What is our obligation here again in the timing?
Expires June 30 of 2028, or we can get out June 20 or 30 of 2027 if we give them 90-day notice.
Okay. So the timing, I mean, we're on time, but this is tight. We've got to.
Absolutely. I think Envision has stipulated some timing requirements in the purchase agreement where they want to stay to allow them to move out before we can even get in and begin construction.
Okay. So Tom, we have a due diligence. What is the next? What do you need to know from the commission?
So we have a September 3 and a September 10 meeting.
Okay.
Which is before due diligence time period ends up here. So commission can talk about it publicly on either of those dates or not at all. If we don't talk about it at all, the default is we're moving forward with Envision.
Okay.
Commission. So if you want to deviate from that, we can put a placeholder on the September 3 and September 10 meeting, and it's up to the commission.
Okay. I guess I would say that if there's a commissioner that wants to deviate from Envision and what we know at this point, then we need to make sure that our county manager knows so that we can staff this and have a deeper conversation. If not, then we'll move forward to putting this on an agenda in September and moving it forward. So everybody clear? You want Third and Main as an option for you? Make sure you let Tom know so that we can staff this and go a little deeper. If not, then we go forward with Envision. Justin, thanks, bud. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Very good presentation.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Hey,
Thank you.
Just I meant to say thank you to Justin, Tanya. That was a lot of work and a lot to unpack. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Well, what else we got?
I'm sure what order to go in. I think Tom Henry's gonna go up to the podium. And then we're gonna talk about process tomorrow. There's 3 new business items that circle around the budget, and he'll take us through the processor, and Justin might chime in too. And then Lindsay wants to talk about when we get to the budget adoption part, what the steps look like, or what we're gonna look like there. Could be.
Okay. Hey, Tom.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thomas Henry, Assistant County Counselor. So you are all familiar with the revenue neutral rate. There is a process that you have to go through in order to adopt a budget that would exceed that. So to that end, we want to discuss, there's a change that we made from how we're running this from previous years to this year. Instead of having one hearing that incorporates the R&R hearing and the budget hearing, as we have done, we did last year, I believe we did it 2 years ago too. There are going to be 2 separate hearings. There's a number of reasons for that. There's been some, I guess, suggestion from state agencies that might be the best practice. So in order to adhere to best practice, we agreed to that change. And I think it just simplifies some of the processes. There's some unique language in the revenue neutral rate statute where you have to adopt a resolution, but you have to adopt it as part of the public hearing. So the public hearing is kept open so that you can take that action, which is very different from the process taken for other types of public hearings. And that includes the public hearing requirements for the budget. There's no similar requirement for the budget hearing to stay open for you to adopt the budget. So by separating them, the process is a lot smoother, in particular with your budget adoption and the amendments and things that you want to do there potentially. So we just want to bring that to your attention, explain why that change was made. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know.
Okay.
That's all I've got.
I think we got it. Yep. All right. We're good. Okay, Tom.
So, is it okay if I jump in, Chairman? Okay. So one of the complexities of the budget every year is not something we really talk about much. And that is that if you actually look at the state budget law, the state budget law says that the Department of Administration, Municipal Services gets to tell us the form that we use to submit our budget. So despite the awesome work that Lori and her team do to produce this 800-page document, despite the wonderful budgeting system that ERP maintains for us, that actually doesn't set the budget. What sets the budget is this form. And so what you can see here, and actually I'm going to have to move because I can't see the bottom. What you see here is the actual form that we are required to produce each year. Where is my mouse? Nicole, help. Where'd my mouse go? Oh, there it is. Okay. So, whoa. It's really hard to do this from the side, just so you know. We have to go through and type in every single number for every single prior budget year. We have to go in and then fill out for each fund. If it's a tax fund, this is what actually sets our budget. This is what sets our mill levy rate. So the state requires us to show all of the property taxes, every GL, every single commitment item of every revenue that we collect, what was actually collected last year, what we expect to collect this year, and what the budgeted amount is next year. Fund balances go in here, and then basically it tells us here are the total receipts and resources available between the fund balance that carries forward from year to year and the amount of tax we've got. If you actually look up here, you will see that there's this lovely X in ad valorem tax in terms of how much revenue we get to tax for next year. So it's going to do that down here at the bottom. And the reason I'm telling you this is because it's going to affect the motions that you potentially do tomorrow. So in addition to all those resources, then we have to show here's how much is actually budgeted in each fund for each department. There is a corresponding tab here that gets into the details for each of those. But this is where it's all summarized. And then down here, this is where it gets complicated. So here's how much budget authority we need. What?
Not complicated so far.
It's not?
No, you said this is where, yes, you said this is where it gets complicated and
It's just listing.
all pretty
Right,
complicated.
okay. Well, this is why you have a professional budget staff. And now don't you admire Lorian because she can go to jail if she screws this up. Too bad. So it's always the fun of being the budget director. So then the state says, okay, you are allowed to carry forward 5% of your budget in it's not appropriated. So when I tell you all we need to budget for contingencies, that's because we're only allowed to budget, or we're only allowed to carry forward so much cash without assigning it to something. So here's where we actually literally just put in, here's the total amount of the budget, give us 5% of that to carry forward. So now we have the total expenditure non-appropriated balance. So we've got this magic number, or I'm sorry, this magic number plus this magic number. So then this is how much property tax we actually need. That's the difference between the resources available and those two numbers that we just talked about, our non-appropriated balance and how much we're appropriating. And then we budget on a delinquency basis. And that basically says we know some people won't pay their property taxes. State law allows us to take whatever last year's actual delinquency rate was plus 5%. And so that's an important, Hope always reports on that. I know Commissioner Howell always asks about it during our ACFR presentation, but that's why that number is so important to us. So when we say 5%, it's not 0.05. It's literally, if it was 2%, you could budget for 7% delinquency. We have historically, but for really bad years, budgeted for a 3% delinquency. And then what this does is it tells us, okay, here's how much you actually need to levy in order to generate that much cash to cover everything. Now, because of these intervening figures that happen here, it's not as simple to go in here and say, I want to cut $1 million out of the budget. You don't get $1 million property tax levy decrease dollar for dollar because you have all of these intervening factors. That's why I have asked for you all to be very clear if you want to actually reduce the overall budget, reduce the mill levy rate on what that is. And that's why historically what you have seen when we've done budgets is the conversation typically isn't about changing the overall budget amount because that's a spending plan. It's typically about reallocating resources within the budget. So this year, you're actually, several of the motions that have been discussed actually would reduce the mill levy rate, would reduce the overall budget. So that's why tomorrow, if you go off the cuff with some of the motions that you've talked about, and that's absolutely your prerogative, I will ask that we recess the meeting for 20 minutes to allow us to come upstairs with our high functioning computers and great network connection to be able to come in here and make the adjustments and see what it really is so we can bring you updated budget motions, because the budget motions that Lorian has prepared for you that you will read off tomorrow will give a total expenditure amount for the whole budget, not just the fund. It will also lost my mouse again. Nicole, help me. Oh, there we go. Ha ha ha. See, I just have to say Nicole's name and it whips into shape. So what you'll wind up reading off tomorrow is the total budget amount here, the total property tax levy here, and the estimated mill levy rate subject to technical adjustment that happens in October, November. So we have to come up here, make the changes in whatever fund you're adjusting, and then have it carry forward to this so we can update your motion. So I'm making one last beg of you that if you actually want to reduce the overall budget or the levy in a way that you haven't yet proposed, please tell us as soon as possible so we can prepare. I've got, I think, 5 or 6 different versions of the certified saved right now that Lorian and I have worked on to figure out different possible scenarios. So I think we're as ready as we can be. But I just thought it would be helpful for you to get a little context for why we're saying it's harder than you think. We've never shown you this before. Typically, this is not remotely your problem, but I just hope you can understand why we're asking for that.
Yeah, okay. I do have a question. So we have different items that each commissioner has talked about that they might want to make adjustments. And what you have done when we've told you about these things, if you've combined all these items into one motion.
Correct.
Well, what if my motion that has 3 items in it is compared to Commissioner Meitzner's motion that has 4 items in it, but you're giving us mill levy and things of that sort? How do we reconcile these things?
So what you will do tomorrow is tell us what the action is that you want to accomplish. What reduction do you want? And then that would be at the point, if it's not a part of the package, what we're going to ask you to do is recess the meeting or move on to other items. While we, again, come up here and plug whichever ones actually pass into the certified budget and come back down to you with revised motions.
Okay.
If you pass them as one package, then we've already got that work for you. We will have motions ready for you that will tell you, here's the budget you're adopting, here's the levy you're adopting, here's the proposed mill levy rate. All of that's ready to go. It's just if you go off script.
And is that only for reductions, not additions?
You cannot increase your budget, remember? You'd have.
Right, but if there's motions tomorrow.
I haven't, if you're going to increase allocations to anything.
Let me be
that's
clear for
gonna
the people that are watching online. I'm not proposing anything out of them. I'm saying you're going to be moving some things around though, correct? Senior centers.
Yes, if senior centers is a discussion, and Lori and I had a good conversation about this yesterday, you are just simply moving budget within a fund. So that's a simple motion to do. There's not going to be any change to the forecast, any change to the overall mill levy rate, because you're just moving it around.
Got it. Okay, any questions? I think we're good then. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks for
A lot of
being
work.
with me.
Yes. Tom, anything else? Lunchtime?
Yeah, well, I guess it is now. 10 o'clock, yes.
Okay. All right, see everybody tomorrow, 9 a.m.